For what felt like forever, it stood as the ultimate symbol of the impossible. I mean, a challenge so huge, it was a dream just to try. And honestly, a tragedy for so many who did. But this isn't just a story about a mountain. What we're diving into today is the story of how humanity finally stood on top of the world.
So to really get a grip on what we're talking about, you have to start with one number. 8,848 meters. That's over 29,000 feet, soaring straight into the sky. That's not just high, it's an altitude so extreme, so hostile, it pushes the human body way past its absolute limits. But look, this wasn't just about some physical barrier of rock and ice. Up there, Everest basically becomes the villain of the story. Think about it. It's a place where the one thing you need to live, the very air you breathe, is so thin it's actively working against you. Every single step is a fight for your life. Okay, so before it ever became this symbol of achievement, Everest was, well, it was a monument to failure. For years, it was this line in the snow that human ambition just couldn't cross. And that scary reputation, it was built one heartbreaking attempt at a time. The moment it was identified as the world's highest peak, that was it. Everest became the ultimate prize. The British especially were obsessed. They launched expedition after expedition. In 21, they were just trying to map the place out. A year later, in 22, they made the first real attempt with bottled oxygen. But the mountain, well, it fought back. 7 Sherpas were lost in an avalanche. And then came 1924, and one of the biggest mysteries in the history of exploration. You've probably heard the names, George Mallory and Andrew Irvine. They were last seen heading for the summit. Going strong for the top, as the report said. But did they make it? The honest answer is, we'll probably never know. They were just swallowed by the mountain. And that cemented its reputation. It wasn't just a challenge anymore. It was a killer. A place of haunting mystery and very, very real danger. But even with that, the dream just wouldn't die. And the team that would finally succeed? It was all about this incredible partnership between 2 guys who could not have been more different. But they were united by this one single powerful dream. So on one hand, you've got Edmund Hillary, a quiet, super determined beekeeper all the way from New Zealand. And on the other, Tenzing Norgay, an incredibly experienced and resilient Sherpa climber, born right there in the shadow of the Himalayas, with this deep spiritual connection to the mountains. I mean, these guys came from opposite ends of the earth, but they both had that same relentless fire inside them to do what everyone else said was impossible. All right, so here we go. 1953. They join the big British expedition led by John Hunt. This was it. This was the one. The whole world was watching. And make no mistake, this was a massive, almost military-style operation. But in the end, success wasn't going to come down to the gear or the planning. It was all going to come down to the raw strength and courage of a few people pushing through conditions you and I can barely even imagine. And when I say the conditions were brutal, I mean brutal. We're talking temperatures so cold they'd freeze your skin in seconds. A constant, terrifying risk of avalanches that could just wipe out the entire team in a blink. And the air, oh man, the air was so thin it caused this crippling exhaustion. Some climbers even started to hallucinate. Failure wasn't just a possibility, it was always just one wrong step away. So after weeks and weeks of setting up camps, pushing higher and higher, it all boiled down to this one day, May 29th, 1953. Hillary and Tenzing, they were the ones chosen to make the final push for the summit. Can you imagine that pressure? The hopes of the whole expedition, really the hopes of a watching world, were literally on their shoulders. And just when they thought they were almost there, right before the summit, the mountain throws one last giant, seemingly impossible obstacle at them. It's this near vertical wall of rock and ice about 40 feet high. It was like the final boss, the last gatekeeper. And yeah, it would become legendary, known forever as the Hillary Step. This is where the story just becomes about pure human will. I mean, they're exhausted, they're freezing, they can't get enough oxygen. But Hillary, he finds his tiny crack between the ice and the rock, and he just starts jamming his body into it, painlessly chipping away at the ice, clawing his way up, inch by agonizing inch, up a rock face that most people thought was completely unclimbable. It's just a moment of pure, raw, unbelievable determination. And then, after all those hours of climbing, after all the decades of failure and loss, they were there. They did it. They were standing on top of the world. You might imagine this huge celebration at the top, but there wasn't one. It was just this overwhelming, profound stillness. Think about that. For the very first time in all of human history, someone was standing on the roof of the planet, surrounded by absolutely nothing but silence, snow, and that vast, empty sky. They were only up there for about 15 minutes. That's it, because at that altitude, every single second is borrowed time. Tenzing made offerings to the mountain gods, a beautiful gesture of respect. Hillary snapped those iconic photos, the proof the world needed. And then, just like that, they started the dangerous journey back down. Because as any climber will tell you, getting to the top is only half the battle. And when the news finally broke, and it was timed perfectly, right for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, the entire globe just erupted. It was this incredible moment of pure shared victory. You have to remember, this was a post-war world that desperately needed a story of human courage and success, and that's what they gave us. They had literally redrawn the map of what was humanly possible. In the end, I think Hillary's famous words really capture the heart of this whole thing. This victory wasn't really about planting a flag on a rock. It was about conquering fear. It was about pushing way past what you thought your limits were and discovering this deep well of inner strength you never knew you had. The physical mountain, that was just the stage for a much bigger, much more personal conquest. And really, that's what I want to leave you with today. Their story proves, without a doubt, that no peak is too high if the human spirit is really willing to climb. So it kind of leaves us all with a question, doesn't it? What's your Everest? What's that great, seemingly impossible challenge in your own life? And what's it going to take for you to start the climb?